Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of SBJ Live. I'm Dan Kaufman with Sports Business Journal. Thank you for being here. This is Money Talks, what pro sports can teach college sports. We will get right into it in just a moment. But as you are entering the platform here, first of all, I want to thank you again for joining us. I see some great names who are coming through here. But what I'd love for you all to do, and if you've been to an SBJ Live episode, you know that this is what I ask of every attendee during an SBJ Live episode. And if you haven't been, welcome. What I'd love for you to do is to introduce yourself in the chat. So there's a chat bubble on the right-hand side, bottom right of my screen. You can tell us who you are and what you do and where you're coming from. And if you see people who you know, feel free to message them in the chat. We encourage that type of interaction and engagement on every episode of SBJ Live. And then directly to the left of the chat bubble is the questions bubble. That is where we want you to put your questions. Ben, my colleague here, has plenty of questions for these great panelists, but we want your questions. That's the beauty of these episodes of SBJ Live. They're live, so we can take your questions. So put your questions in the chat, or excuse me, in the questions bubble. Don't wait until the end. There's no specific Q&A period, so put your questions in as soon as they go into your head. And then you can also upvote questions. So if you see a bunch of questions in there and you want to make sure that Ben gets to one, upvote the question you want to make sure that we get to. Okay, we'll go for about 40, 45 minutes maybe, but if it's just going along really well, we will keep going longer than that. We had nearly 500 people register for this, so we should have a great discussion. And I thank you again for being here. All right, it's my pleasure to welcome to the stage Jared Kozen. Jared is the Deputy AD, Chief Revenue and Marketing Officer at Michigan State. Rob Higgins, he's the CEO of Athletics at the University of South Florida. And Andrew Donovan, he is the president at Altius Sports Partners, and your moderator, Ben Portnoy. Ben.
Thanks so much. That was a great intro. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Rob, Andrew, and Jared for taking the time to do this. Obviously, no shortage of things to talk about here, but I guess, Jared and Rob, I'll start with you guys as the, I guess, for lack of a better term, kind of the newbies in the college sports space. Let's start here. Why on earth did you guys want to jump into this space right now? Jared, if you want to kick it off, then Rob, we can go to you.
Yeah, sure. No, it's an exciting time in college athletics. So I spent my entire career on the professional sports side, so 18 plus years in Major League Baseball, NFL, and with NHL clubs. And it's a unique time in college athletics is the long and short of it. I had it's not that surprising, a search firm that had kind of handled the deal. And I'd read a little bit about Jay Batt, our athletic director, and what he had done at Alabama and Georgia Tech, and his desire to modernize and commercialize Michigan State athletics. And so that was really the catalyst for me, hearing about the growth opportunities. And when you think about commercialization, you look across professional sports, and most of the clubs, in the major sports have been widely commercialized for many, many years. And so the opportunity was, I felt, pretty strong in college athletics to make some real impact in a short amount of time.
Yeah, I would just piggyback off what Jared said. I totally agree. And I think I see a lot of the same reasoning in why I wanted to make the move. I think the landscape of college athletics has gotten just dynamic enough where there's so much opportunity. I've always been the type of person that takes a lot of comfort in the chaos. And so for it to be as chaotic as it is at this very moment was really attractive to me. But then also I care a lot about our university. Both my parents went here, my sister went here, I went here. It's been deep rooted in our community. And so to have the opportunity to be a teammate here and help drive this next chapter is really something I don't take lightly and something that's really special. So I think when you combine both all of the exciting things happening at USF and then as well as the dynamic nature of college athletics in general, it was just an incredible point in time to make that move.
Obviously, the title of this, What Pro Sports Can Teach College Sports. I know all of you guys have a little bit different perspectives on this and frankly touch different parts of the ecosystem, which I think is helpful here. But Andrew, I guess for you guys at Altius, you obviously worked on campus and have that experience. Altius, got started in the NIL space, has evolved since then. I know we've had a lot of conversations about kind of what you guys are doing and evolving. What are some of the things that you're seeing from campus these days? And do you feel like your guys' company is touching? And what have become some of the biggest sort of, maybe touch points that you guys have had, at least in the last couple of years?
Sure. And Ben, appreciate you having me. It's great to be with you, Jared and Rob. I will say at the outset, having perspective from folks like Jared and Rob in the college space and bringing their experiences in pro sports, it's vital to where we're heading as an entity and as an industry. And they're not alone. There's others that are coming to the table there. And I think that mix of perspective is really important to marrying the old and how things have always been done on college campuses with the new, as we know that the industry is evolving and it necessitates a different way of thinking and doing business. For us, as the majority of the industry knows, we really made our name in the NIL space, but the vision was always to be that future of college sports thought partner, that thought leader. And so because of that, organically, over the last year in particular, we have found ourselves helping school partners in a multitude of different issues, some that are related to NIL, some that are tangential, many that have nothing to do with NIL. We're looking at different revenue streams, helping institutions evaluate and optimize the partnerships that exist within those spaces, the terms of the deals that they are entering into, to really think differently about maybe the traditional way of doing things and evaluate how can we optimize and grow our revenue. One piece I'll mention to pick up on what Jared said, you notice he used the term commercialize rather than maybe revenue generation. And I think that's a key distinction. It's one thing to generate revenue, and we know that exists on campuses, and difference between pro and college in a small way would be your donor dollars. But what I think there is room for a lot of growth on college campuses is commercializing, going beyond just generating revenue, building the brand, finding opportunities for crossover between all of your different revenue streams, all of your different third parties where they do exist, so that you can grow the pie across the board. And that's a lot of what we're doing at Altius.
Jared, I see you nodding. Feel free to jump in if you have something there.
Yeah, I mean that's how we thought of it. It's the story came out I think about a week, 10 days ago about us launching the affiliation with Spartan Ventures, and it's exactly that. It's what Andrew said. It's a super exciting time, but taking some of our verticals where they may not be directly tied to revenue on its surface, right? Brand and creative. And communications, and then finding new opportunities within that, like Andrew said, to commercialize those spaces and have those verticals work collaboratively in a way that maybe we haven't done before in the college space.
Rob, I know it's easy to look at USF and see a lot of the momentum. Obviously, a great football team. You got a new stadium coming, a lot else going on. What are some of the things that you've seen, at least in sort of the early days of your tenure at USF, that are maybe some chances for opportunity, or what do you see as kind of, maybe some levers you guys can pull quickly to kind of, whether it's generate more revenue or just take a little bit more of a professional look at kind of the way that you guys have operated?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is getting a great understanding of where we're at now. I think I have a really distinct version of our vision moving forward, but we've got to make sure we know exactly we're benchmarked currently. We're taking an episodic approach to it. It's really 4-phased. It's make sure we win the athletic department. We have everybody built in, bought into what we're doing, making sure everybody on our team, all 200 staff members, understand that it's not just the sales department or the marketing department's responsibility to sell and market. We all have a role in that. And then once we accomplish that and have everybody unified from that front, we're going to move on to the campus and make sure that we draw as much campus collaboration as possible and try to get really the entire campus pulling in that same direction. And then we're fortunate, being in such a great media market, to have a lot of strong partnerships here, as well as the opportunity for a lot of eyeballs. And so we'll then move on to the community. And when you unlock the community here, you also unlock the country. So it's this, win the building, win the campus, win the community, then win the country approach that we're really focused on. We don't want to take any shortcuts. I think when we've stubbed our toe in the past as an athletic program, we've taken those shortcuts and thought that we had the right to go own the community. Well, we can't own the community until everybody in our building understands the role that they're going to play in terms of brand building, revenue generation, anything and everything that we're going to try to accomplish here as a modernized college athletic department.
I guess I'll ask Jared this, and Rob, feel free to jump in on this too, because I think you probably have a decent perspective on this. But considering the markets that you guys are in, obviously you've got a lot of professional sports in and around those. How do you kind of lack of a better term, punch through with that, and what goes into sort of helping build that brand and taking on maybe bigger market share or whatever you want to call it?
I think in a lot of ways, a lot of things we want to do. The other, like the professional sports teams in our marketplace, have paved the way in a lot of ways. We are not today a fully digital ticketing department. We aspire to be, and we will be. But when you look across, the Lions, the Tigers, Red Wings, Pistons, I mean, our fans are not operating and going to events in a vacuum, right? And so they're going to these other events. And so the idea, I think in a lot of ways, those other experiences have helped pave the way. And I think we're looking at it through a different lens, similar to like the paradigm Rob's looking at it through. I think we're looking for opportunities that can be, it's not just about revenue, like Rob said, it's got to be, there's interplay between fan experience, student athlete experience, and then also, what's best for MSU athletics. And we can find the intersection where all three of those are going to be positive wins. Those are areas that we're prioritizing.
Yeah, I mean, I would just piggyback off that. I think being in such a great pro sports market, there's the ability to make sure that we carve out a role that's complementary versus competitive. Yes, there's only a finite amount of discretionary dollars available, but at the same time, we feel like we have a really distinct offering when it comes to having 400,000 living alumni, 50,000 students, and the passion and affinity that only, the college landscape can draw up. So I think we try to be really joined at the hip with all of our professional sports franchises, find ways to be able to collaborate. I can tell you just anecdotally, whether it's on social or in real life, the more our locals and fans see that happening, the more they get excited and they love the Team Tampa Bay mentality. It's our job to not only make sure it happens, but then to monetize it on the backside. And I think you're just going to see that happen more and more throughout moving forward.
Andrew, you talked a little bit about kind of the shifting priorities for Altius and kind of some of the more broader consulting you guys are doing. That's included bringing on staff and looking at some of the voices and people that are involved. Obviously, you guys have sort of married a number of people from both campus and professional space. Like, what's that kind of look like? Walk us through a little bit of that and kind of how you guys have attacked that piece of it.
Sure. I think specifically when you think about professional sports experience, from a network informally beyond our full-time staff, our advisor group, we certainly have those connections. We're constantly having those conversations, but specifically, we recently brought in a gentleman named John Durbin, who most recently was the CCO with FC Cincinnati, came from Bagula Sports and Entertainment, brings a strong revenue leadership background into the work we're doing with marrying college and pro opportunities. Ron Rakuya has been an advisor, a very involved advisor, I might add, for us for the last year plus. He was with Bagula as well. He headed up revenue with the Bills and the Sabres. And so you have people that are bringing a totally different perspective to the space that then can be married with somebody like myself that spent a dozen years in administrative roles on campus. Other leaders and folks throughout our organization that have campus-specific, conference-specific, agency brand experiences where we can really bring all of that perspective together to offer solutions. I do want to point one thing out relative to your question on the pro and the college space, particularly in a market like Detroit and a market like Tampa. When we think about data, and Jared alluded to this, college is at its infancy relative to use of data and monetizing off of that data, whether it be in the ticketing space, fan engagement, targeted marketing, you name it. But so too, I think when you think about valuation, and I would imagine, and Jared, you can disagree with me on this, I think you'll be in line. I would think when Michigan State or when USF is looking at the value of different assets they have in different spaces, they don't want to just have their comps be college. They want to consider the professional teams as well to understand what that market looks like. So as much as the use of data is at its infancy and I think needs to develop more and more in the college space, so too does the data in and making sure you have the right data sets, because it can't just be college. You've got to consider in the right markets, professional sports, live entertainment, things that come into play in order to raise revenue opportunities for the institution.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly right, Andrew. I mean, when we're looking at best practices and comps, right, comparables, we're looking, to your point, at other athletic departments, but we're also looking across at professional sports. I think it's a different way of benchmarking than maybe where we've been in the past. I also want to couch and say and preface it by saying I've been with Michigan State athletics about 5 weeks, So I definitely do not claim to be an expert in the college space. So these are some early, some early anecdotes.
Definitely. I think to that, I think this is a good question from the chat, and we'll kind of mix these in again. If anyone has any questions, feel free to jump in and chime in there. But this one from Cody Van Fleet, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. We have heard hesitations from ADs around pro sports folks coming into college athletics as universities are more cautious about the commercial partners they align with. How do you mix the tradition of universities and the creativity of pro sports? I guess, Rob, I'd turn that to you, sitting in that chair. Again, I know, kind of to Jared's point, I think you've been in the job now, 3 months, give or take. But what's that look like from your end?
Only been in place 6 weeks, Ben. So at times it's felt like 3 months, but it has been awesome every step of the way, and truly enjoying every second of this. I get I'd frame it a little bit different. Is our trustees had the vision. Our chair, Will Weatherford, and vice chair Mike Griffin had the vision to really evolve this role from athletic director to chief executive officer for athletics. And it's more so than a title. It's an acknowledgement that college athletics and this 9-figure enterprise has grown dramatically, not only over the last decade, but in the last 3 to 4 years alone. But what I would say is, while probably technically right now maybe the only CEO of athletics in the country, some of the best CEOs I know, both in and out of sports, are athletic directors sitting in a very similar seat. What they've navigated and been able to get through as well as advance over these recent months and years, accompanied by the dynamic landscape, has been truly phenomenal. Finding ways to generate revenue, to Jared's point, finding ways to commercialize, making sure they're doing everything they can to position themselves the best possible from a rev share perspective. All of those things really lends itself to not only how far college athletics has come, but also where it's going. So again, really, really dynamic. But we have tried to stay away from this like pros versus practitioners conversation and focus more on getting things right here. That formula, in terms of some of the early hires that we've had, has leaned heavily into pro sports to be able to catch up to some degree. But time will tell naturally how things pay off for us here in both the short and the long term.
Andrew, you brought this up, and I think it was a good point about data. We got another question in here about that. When you speak about the infancy from Connor Douglas, when you speak about the infancy of data in college sports, what do you think the reason is for that? Is it lack of tools available, skill set, or any other reason?
I think there's a lot going on college campuses within athletics departments that don't go on within professional sports organizations, particularly as it relates to operational management of people and just traditional roles that folks on campus have played. And so oftentimes, I think that's why we see colleges a step behind the pros. When you think about the lifeblood of a college athletics program, and a lot of that has to do with donor giving. Of course, there's ticket sales, there's multimedia rights, corporate sponsorships, et cetera. But at the pro level, you generally have the owner who's making an investment, and they view success in generating revenue, and generating revenue is going to help them win because they can spend more toward the cap, and et cetera, and those types of things. College hasn't necessarily always looked at it that way. And I think now we're getting into this space of how do you shift your mindset to net yield and to profitability and making good investment on opportunities that come in the future. Look, the other piece is from a skill set standpoint, you generally probably didn't have that within an athletics department for a very long time. And so this is a space where I do think you can steal from the pros. You can steal from other industries and bring people in and make different investments that simply weren't a line item or weren't a focus by athletics departments for much of time.
Jared, feel free to jump in if you wanted to.
Going back to the question you asked Rob and then dovetail it with Andrew. I mean, I think it kind of comes down to, alignment with leadership and emotional intelligence, right? So, we talk about the college space like it's all unified, right? But the reality is, like, even within the Big Ten, our schools with different leadership are run completely differently. And our athletic departments are run very differently. And same, coming from Major League Baseball, the Pirates may not be run the same as another organization. And there's, if you're emotionally intelligent and you're learning as you come into these jobs, and I think probably the best thing for me was having worked at so many different organizations, you come in, you understand, hey, there's some legacy partnerships. There's some understanding and culture of why things are done a certain way. I think if you approach it with that mindset, like there's things in the college space that are just distinctly college, and they're great things and they should be celebrated and don't need to be changed. Right. And so I think coming in and just being aware of, like, for Michigan State, what are the traditions? What's the history? What are the areas to like innovate within those histories and traditions and find the right fit? I think is really, really important, as opposed to like a one size fits all approach. But I think it's much more nuanced than just saying pros versus college. I think it comes down to leadership and just awareness of the circumstances that they're working within.
Yeah. Rob, I'd ask you this: in your opinion, what are some of the most beneficial business models that you feel like maybe worked well in the pro side that you feel like could maybe be applied to college athletics, whether that's better, differently, or could be retrofitted maybe in some capacity?
Yeah, I would hit generally. I think the creativity mindset that professional sports has continued to have has been incredible, and it's almost ironic being on a college campus, just how important it is for all of us to continue to be students of the entire industry, not just professional sports, but sports and entertainment in general. I think some of the best things we've learned over the years in my prior role specifically had to do with entities that were quite frankly non-traditional in nature, whether it be the Savannah Bananas to TKO and WWE and UFC, to our friends at Red Bull. I think just really thinking outside of the box as much as possible, but to get a little more granular, I think when it comes to the fan experience and the premium offerings that professional sports, quite frankly, continue to innovate and find ways to be able to leverage remnant spaces and to be able to make seats that much better and incrementally have higher value, I think are some of the things that we're constantly thinking about, especially when you look at the fact that we have a brand new on-campus stadium that's coming in 22 months' time. And that stadium has continued to morph. It morphs every single day. From here, I will head to a meeting in about 30 minutes where we have decisions being made related to premium and other items related to it. So it's just one of those, it's a constant evolution. You got to stay on your toes and be nimble to try to take advantage of anything and everything that could be possible.
Ben, can I chime in on that for a moment?
Yeah.
I think when you think about a difference, a somewhat granular difference between college and pro, there's a lot more outsourcing at the college level versus pro, taking certain things in-house. And there can be limitations, certainly from a third-party relationship standpoint. And look, that's not me suggesting that schools need to take everything in-house. That's an institutional decision. There's many decisions to be made or considerations associated with that. And I'm not going to name specific names. Like, there's fantastic third parties across all these different areas, sponsorship, ticketing, et cetera. So very, very well may make sense for an institution to continue doing that. But I think it's really important at this moment in time, and I know a lot of schools are already doing this, evaluating those third-party relationships, of which we are one, in the interest of ensuring incentives align, right? Are there mutual growth opportunities based on the structure of that deal? What control do you have when you have a third party involved over maximizing your revenue? And just by virtue of having a third-party relationship doesn't mean you lose all control, but the terms of the deal and the assets that are being provided, the different levers that can be pulled within that contractual arrangement have a massive impact on those outcomes. If you think about F&B very granularly, historically, even in professional sports, that's something that's been outsourced. And the typical deal structure is a percentage royalty. There's a revenue split between the team and the F&B partner. And as long as the team, or in this case, the school, let's say, we're getting a high percentage, everything's good. Everybody's happy about that. But if you take a step back and consider the control that's being lost in a straight royalty deal, it impacts your ability to leverage other opportunities, right? And so you think about royalty versus shared P&L, it allows more control, input, alignment in the offerings you're providing, related hospitality experiences. And again, those are all things that can drive different revenue that need to be evaluated on an institution by institution basis with a multitude of different considerations to make those decisions.
Yeah, I think that's a really good segue. And Jared, I was going to ask you a little bit more about Spartan Ventures, because I think, Michigan State's certainly one of a handful of schools that have taken sort of that approach. Rob, I know the American has done some things like this and taking those sort of commercial assets and bringing them in-house from a conference level. I guess, Jared, what are some of the things that you feel like, what do you feel like Spartan Ventures kind of allows you guys to do from a school level? And I guess what kind of opportunity is there with that?
I make quicker, more efficient decisions the way more like a privatized company would, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's not necessarily a negative thing. It's just a reality of large public institutions that operate differently than private companies do. I think it allows us to be nimble. Andrew talked a lot about the NIL space, and it's evolving. Anybody that thinks they have all the answers for what exactly it's going to look like, I think, is being disingenuous. And so I think being able to have the right people in a well-capitalized business structure where we have that ability to be nimble and react as circumstances externally change, I think is going to position us for long-term success.
Again, there's a couple of questions here in the chat that we'll get to. We got about 10, 15 minutes left, give or take. But if you have questions, feel free to drop them in there. There's a good one from Michael Crawley, and I'll just leave this to whoever wants to take it. But do you think there's a large difference in the risk appetite between pro and college across decisions like partners, platforms, and generally trying new things?
Probably depends on what type of university you're at to some degree in terms of the risk appetite. I think Jared earlier used the term alignment, and we're really fortunate here to have a set of trustees, a president's office, athletic leadership, a lot of momentum right now where everybody's aligned and in terms of priority, in terms of vision, in terms of anything and everything we need to be doing in this current moment in time. As well. And so probably depends a lot on making sure everybody's on the same page. A university like this, major state university, has a lot of different stakeholders. And again, to have everybody pull in the same direction is a really special thing, but it, quite frankly, isn't the case everywhere.
I think that's right. I think, even an entity like Spartan Ventures being considered doesn't happen without the alignment that Rob's talking about. And, President Guskowitz at Michigan State and J-Bat really aligning and working together to make that happen. That entity is not a reality, without that alignment.
Another good question here in the chat. NIL from Abby. NIL has created an environment where college athletes often enter the transfer portal in search of more money. What can college football take away from the NFL in terms of salary cap, contracts? When do college athletics reach a point of needing contracts? Or I guess maybe even the broader question is probably collective bargaining as well.
It's a loaded question.
I was going to say, how much time you got, right?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take just an early stab on it. I think that is one of the, I think we're talking a little bit more about the sports business side of things, but when you look at player personnel, probably the biggest thing that college athletics has begun to emulate of pro sports is the responsibility of a general manager and managing those resources and using analytics to provide the greatest return on investment, both from a recruiting and a retention side of things. We're really proud of how that's evolved here from the early days of the passage of name, image, and likeness to the role of collectives to the house settlement this past summer. There's no doubt that it will continue to evolve, but it's just really important that in addition to making sure that the number one priority is the student athlete experience, one of the next priorities is making sure you're great stewards of both the public and private investments that are being made into the athletic program and providing the greatest ROI possible. And so naturally, that's a huge topic of conversation here each and every day. It's something that we're fortunate to have been really prepared for and seem to be on the forefront on for sure.
Just to build off of that, and Abby, specifically to the second part of your question, it's not the same, obviously, a playing contract in the NFL or any professional league with what we at Altius call athlete licensing agreements, the agreements, the contracts that institutions enter into with athletes for revenue sharing. But there are a lot of similarities, and those are different from school to school. Some that look a whole heck of a lot more like playing contracts than necessarily we're going to utilize these elements of your name, image, and likeness in return for compensation. So you're already seeing some of that enter the space. as Ben said, we could talk about this all day. The nature of collective bargaining and the status of the athletes as employees at the pro level, it just creates a different level of accountability and opportunity for enforcement than currently exists in the college space. And we can have all the confidence in the world in the CSC, and that leadership there is fantastic. And if anybody's going to be able to do it, it's them. But there are just, let's be real, limitations relative to the litigious environment surrounding college athletics, what we've witnessed, not just over the last 5 years, but going back the last 15 years, starting with O'Bannon, where until there is a change that actually allows for some certainty relative to expecting not to have a state attorneys general step in and try to challenge rules or an individual to challenge from litigation, a decision that's made on part of the CSC, it's going to be really, really hard to have an apples to apples comparison.
I think that's well said, Andrew, right? I think a lot of us would probably agree, right? Rules are only so good as people want to be governed by them. And that's we exist in an interesting time in college sports on that front. This is a good question from Bruce. And I think we've talked a little bit about, obviously, every school is a little bit different. Every conference is a little bit different places, different priorities, whatever. But Bruce Mann asked, challenge facing college sports is media rights, is fragmentation. Several PE firms hope to centralize scheduling and aggregate rights to maximize distribution deals. What are your collective thoughts on the conference's desire and willingness to align to make that happen? Whoever wants to take that, feel free. I know there's a lot there.
I'm happy to start. I think similar to what I was mentioning about evaluating decisions related to in-house versus outsource, these are all institution-specific decisions. And Jared touched upon this. The involvement of boards and presidents and chancellors, and are you public, are you private, all of the different things that make institutions unique. It's going to make this evaluation different from school to school and from conference to conference. At the end of the day, there's a lot of complications associated with this, particularly if we're talking about media rights. Those contracts go different durations. They're with different networks from conference to conference, all of which creates complications. And so at the end of the day, it's really hard to say, like, yes, a school should chase PE, or no, a school should not chase PE, because they're not all created equal. They're all structured differently. What's being offered to the school on the front end and being provided back on the back end is different from deal to deal. The one thing I will say a little bit more definitively is when you think about access to capital, schools have access to capital. And I think what you're getting in return for that is a really, really important consideration of what you're giving up relative to getting that capital. So I think everybody knows what I mean by that. And I think that's a very, very important component of the evaluation for any institution.
I think that's well said. I guess, Rob and Jared, we talked about it. Obviously, you guys have been in these roles now, 5-6 weeks, but are there any things that have surprised you, at least in that time? Anything unique, anything that's popped up? And it could be anything, but anything that's caught your eye, at least in that short time?
No, I mean, I think I just continue here going into it, how much a lot of the folks that had been in college athletics for quite some time now lament the time that we don't have with student athletes. Like for us, getting in here and getting the chance to be a part of a really transformative period of their life has been incredible. So I think it's the day-to-day interaction with the student athletes, whether it be in the hallways, the parking lot, at their games, or at some of their friends' games, is part of it that has been truly incredible. And I think the more that we can tap into that and play the role of matchmaker when it comes to true NIL and showcasing that every one of these 500 student athletes has a really unique story that we can help brand build around and be a part of, whether they're here for 6 months, a year, 2 years, no matter how long it is. I think that, to me, has been one of the more eye-opening things, and one of the, quite frankly, one of the I would say positive surprises is part of it. I knew it was going to be awesome to be around them and have a chance to play a role in their development from a physical, mental, professional, and financial development side of things, but living it out on a day-to-day basis has been really meaningful.
I'd say twofold, at Michigan State. I'd say on the one hand, the staff and employees, I think there may be a notion, like a preconceived notion, that folks that have been at MSU for a long time in athletics didn't want this kind of evolution. And I've been like really, really pleasantly surprised by how excited our athletics department is to kind of take this evolution under Jay to really build something special and different. And at the end of the day, it's going to hopefully make us more competitive. Jay has said it, so I don't mind seconding it. We want to be a top 10 athletics program in the country consistently year in and year out. And so everyone's kind of under that same rallying call. And I think that's been really, surprising and awesome. I'd say the other piece that has been surprising, we spend a lot of time in professional sports trying to engage fans and try to build that rabid fan. And the student body at Michigan State's been unbelievable, whether it's, volleyball, whether it's hockey or basketball. I mean, the student fans here, we don't have to work very hard to create a fortress and to create a real competitive home field advantage. And I know Coach Izzo gave it a shout out after our last basketball game. The student body here at Michigan State's exceptional when it comes to providing a home field advantage for our teams.
Andrew, I'll point this one to you, but Rob, I think you can probably speak to this considering the stadium project and the facility things that you guys are doing at USF. But question from Ryan Opelt. How are you balancing prioritizing investments between facilities and NIL resources, knowing that NIL has dominated the conversation these last few years? Do you see that balance shifting over the next few years as revenue sharing models begin to stabilize?
We would have thought they would have stabilized by now, right? In terms of the NIL investment, and certainly that hasn't been the case in recent months. It's again, I hate to go back to this, but it's really going to be institution by institution. And at the end of the day, we all know money talks right now within college athletics as it relates to attracting the best talent. And so I don't think that's going to go away anytime soon. It's going to be a matter of the investments that institutions make in the infrastructure in-house and with partners, external partners, to generate those opportunities for athletes. Now, at the same time, it's almost a simultaneous mission, because if you're not tending to your facilities and finding new ways to create revenue within your facilities in a multitude of different ways, that's going to hurt you relative to paying that cap that's going to continue to increase from an internal revenue share standpoint. So I really think the investment has to be made to where you can do those things on parallel tracks, and then ultimately make decisions that are best for your athletics department and your institution, where maybe one year you're pulling that lever really hard on the facility space and you're making some concessions in the NIL space, and maybe that flips the following year. Easier said than done, certainly, but I don't think it's an or. I think it's an and proposition.
Rob, I guess for you guys on campus, I mean, you guys are certainly going through this conversation right now with a big facilities project, while also, obviously working through athlete compensation and everything else. Like, how are you guys balancing and striking that balance?
Yeah, I mean, I really echo what Andrew said. It's not an either or, it's a both. On the facility side of things, I think our university has long fought the perception of being a commuter school, and that was only enhanced, or the reputation of that was only continued to snowball based off of us playing our home football games 25 minutes away. It's a great venue in terms of Raymond James Stadium, NFL venue, great experience for our student athletes, but still it really fed into that commuter school perception. So to finally have our own home on campus here, where in addition to it galvanizing not only our campus, but our community, and inserting itself into a community-wide portfolio of facilities where there's a need area. Basically we had 2,500 seat facilities, or 65,000 seat facility. This is 35,000, and opens ourselves up to outside events. I think all of that, in addition to new revenue streams for us that, quite frankly, when you're renting a facility, you don't tap into, like parking and concessions and suite premiums, even some enhanced sponsorship offerings. So all of that, I think, plays a huge role into the importance of facilities for us. But then obviously from a rev share standpoint, we want to make sure we're maximizing that, so that on a parallel path, to Andrew's point, you have the facilities necessary to create a really elite level, national championship level student athlete experience, but then you're also are able to compensate at the level that's appropriate as well.
I think we're kind of pushing up on time here, but I'll ask one more question. I guess, well, actually, it looks like we got a couple more. So I'll ask one more from the chat, and then we'll go one more question on my end. But I think this is actually a really good question. And Jared, if you want to take it, how do you balance individual athlete branding versus institutional branding? You see this balance playing a role in recruiting and retaining top athletes?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we're talking about. I think it's absolutely a balance. I think, you know, one of Jay's strategies that he's been very open on is, you know, elite NIL athlete raising, you know, and something that we've been focused on here. It's a tough balance. I think when we look at the brand of Michigan State and Michigan State athletics and making sure that it's the right alignment, the right fit, I think there's opportunities. I call, you know, the three-headed monster, right? When we work with a brand, for example, and a brand wants to be involved with one of our student athletes and a brand is also a partner of ours, we've got the chance, if it's the right brand, it's the right student athlete that fits what we're all trying to do together. That's the three-headed monster, because you're amplifying that on, you know, the student athlete social channels, Michigan State social channels, and the athlete and the brand and the athlete. So I think that's the key, is finding the right fits. And sometimes that's, you know, you're using data to try to find those right fits in terms of where we think segments and marketing demographics are going to be for a specific partner. And sometimes you're using gut and instinct that it just feels like it's the right fit for the student athlete, the school, and the brand.
I'll go to kind of Rob, go ahead if you wanted to jump in.
Well, I would just say the only thing I would add is I think a lot of times we lose sight of the teachable moment that is true NIL for these student athletes. Well, I know that a lot of them have representation for them to have these subtle reminders when it comes to negotiation and fulfillment and contracts and all of those things that maybe whatever their area of study when it comes to their major may not offer them. So to have this, you know, true NIL serve in a way for them to be able to learn something in this moment in time, and then also get compensation for it is really meaningful as well, and something that's probably not talked about enough.
The last question I have for you guys as we kind of wrap this thing up is just, as we've talked about a lot of different pieces of this, but if there's one thing you look at from maybe the pro sports model that you feel like could be applied to college sports, or one piece that you think would be really good in the college sports space, what would that be? And Andrew, if you want to kick it off, and then we can kind of go around the horn to Rob and then Jared.
Sure. And I think we touched on this a little bit earlier. You think about evaluation of an institution's IP rights and overall sales and activation strategy, really taking a step back and planning for that as an institution. Many schools have historically looked at themselves as small markets. And I think a lot of that has to do with geography alone. And the reality is, in many cases, they're not. And oftentimes they're bigger than their professional counterparts or local counterparts at the professional level. And so I think schools have to start thinking that way relative to how they value their assets and how they approach partnerships. Along those lines, I think an area in which colleges can take sponsorship lessons from the pros is the number of sponsors you're engaging with, the number of categories that are being offered to sponsors. Jared touched upon this, right? There's dynamics at play from a donor standpoint and legacy relationships, things of that nature that are unique to college. But there's absolutely room for improvement relative to the sophistication and strategy in this particular area. To put it simply, sometimes less is more, and you can provide better value to your sponsors and a better return for your institution.
Andrew's answer kind of touched on it, and something he said earlier touched on it to me. I mean, this is a broad stroke answer, but I think just making more data-driven decisions. I think that's an area where sports is really, you know, business intelligence and having good insights to make data-driven decisions is something that has been a hallmark, you know, at least the last decade, if not longer, for most professional sports organizations. And that's an approach and a change. And it stems from, I think, the need to be able to do it, right? You have to get that decision right now if you've got more revenue on the line potentially. And I think all the things that we're doing to be able to understand our fans more and more is going to help us use that data to be able to make better decisions for our fans, our student athletes, our donors. So I just say data-driven decision-making in general would be something that I think the college space will benefit from.
Rob, the
Yeah,
last
I
one.
mean, I was going to say the only thing I would add is I think the college space and individual university athletic programs have often been buyers of consulting and third-party services, and I think there's a real opportunity for us to be sellers of that. I think we're constantly asking ourselves here in the early days, what can we do to reskin our services and potentially monetize them? Look, we've got a great live events team. We've got a great social team. We've got folks in entire departments that are really good at what they do. And in the past, I think, and again, across the country, a lot of times you're leaning into different vendors. How can we become that vendor to diversify our revenue and monetize that way? So I think it's flipping the traditional model on its head and finding ways to be a seller when, quite frankly, we've been a buyer for the exact same thing, and maybe there's an opportunity for us to double down on our skill sets and be able to monetize that way.
Well, again, Jared, Rob, Andrew, thank you guys so much for taking the time to do this. Obviously, a busy time of year, busy time in college athletics, so we appreciate you guys carving out some time to do this. And I'll toss it back to Dan to wrap things up here.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. To the audience, thank you so much for being here. If this was interesting to you, if you work in college sports, or if you just need to know more about college sports, make sure you know about SBJ's Intercollegiate Athletics Forum. There's a link in the chat. Ben will be there. Plenty of other SBJ people will be there. And it's a great event. So check it out. It's in December. Next week on SBJ Live, we are off, and we're not back until the week after Thanksgiving, December 3rd. We're back with an episode on answer engine optimization, how the sports industry prepares for transacting within an LLM. Very interesting subject. You can register for it at sportsbusinessjournal.com by clicking on SBJ Live. To the audience, thanks for your time. Jared, Rob, Ben, Andrew, we couldn't do it without you. Thanks so much. Best of luck, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks all.
Thanks, guys.